Welcome to the 6th Annual Whalefest Monterey. My name is Steve Elsie. I'm with KRML Radio. I have a little bit of housekeeping to take care of first, and then we'll get right to our speaker. Here's some of our sponsors today: Old Fisherman's Wharf Association, MAOS, and the Monterey History and Art Association. Our next speaker, Scott Kathey, is the Federal Regulatory and Enforcement Coordinator for the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and I believe he is the NOAA, that would be the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's federal regulatory enforcer. Scott not only enforces, but he also interprets and delivers federal regulations and investigates the violations. He is also on the Sanctuary Emergency Response Team. So when that water gets up to the second floor of the aquarium, he'll be one of the guys that'll be running around a boat. Anyway, please, a warm welcome, Scott Kathey.
Good afternoon. What I want to talk about today is protecting our wildlife, marine wildlife out in the sanctuary, and I kind of want to cover 4 topics. The first is to discuss the effects of human disturbance on marine wildlife, particularly cumulative effects of disturbance. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the types of disturbance that we see in the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And then going to talk a little bit about federal and state laws. There's a lot of confusion out there about what the law says about wildlife disturbance. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about what you can do to help out with this problem that we have. So, what's the big deal? All we want to do is look at some animals, snap some pictures. We're not hurting anything, you know. So I went by the otter, and it looked at me, or it swam away. What is the big deal? Well, I'm going to use the otter, the poster child of Central California, because sea otters, unlike seals and sea lions, they don't have a big layer of fat, blubber, to keep them warm. So they basically eat a lot of calories and burn off a lot of heat out of their bodies, which they trap in their fur to keep them warm in this 48 to 55 degree water out here. Now, in order to do that, in order to maintain this high metabolism to give off this much heat, they have to eat 25 to 30% of their body weight a day. Now, think about your body weight. I don't want to get anybody upset, but think about your body weight, and think about if you had to eat 25 to 30% of your body weight a day. For me, we're looking at over 50 pounds of food a day. And that's if it's just delivered on a plate. If you've got to hunt for it, eat it, what's the next thing you're most likely to do after having a large, mega burrito? You're going to probably take a nap. And that's what they do. They feed, they hunt, they forage, they eat, and they need to sleep. So these disturbances, particularly for the sea otter, can be very bad for them. One in a day might not be that big of a problem, but I like to refer to it as the death by 1,000 cuts. If they're repeatedly being disturbed and their nap cycles being completely or continually disrupted, that wears them down. It also could interrupt their feeding. It can also separate mothers from pups. So California Department of Fish and Game has done some studies out here on sea otter disturbance, and when a sea otter is awakened or disturbed from its rest cycle, it takes about 15 minutes for it to kind of settle back down, get back in the kelp, anchored up, and kind of nod back off. Well, if you've ever been down on Cannery Row in the summertime, when there are several hundred kayaks out there, and there are paddle boarders, and there are boats, and there are divers, and there are swimmers, etc., you could conceivably be disturbing the same group of otters, especially if they're right in front of the Plaza Hotel or they're right off of the aquarium or something like that, every 4 times in an hour. Very conceivable. The animals could never get sleep, and when animals can't sleep or they can't feed as they need to, they get tired, just like we do. They get stressed, which leads to sickness, which leads to disease, which leads to mortality. But that father and son team that was out there waking those otters up to take that picture, they never see that end of the pipeline. And this is the hardest thing to convey to people, that this thing that seems seemingly innocent and non-effectual to you, multiplied by all the other tens of thousands of tourists all year long, can lead to even death. But you won't see that. You just have to know that. You've got to take some proactive steps. So types of disturbance. Now I want to bridge now, not just sea otters. Sea otter's my poster child. But we're talking about marine mammals and seabirds in a more broad sense. Whales, seals, porpoise, common murres, cormorants, snowy plover. So all of these animals will respond to visual disturbance. It may be something that's moving toward them very quickly that startles them. It may be a helicopter bursting over a cliff top where birds are on the cliff, bursting them into flight. It may be something as what we might think innocuous as Snoopy on the blimp, right? And you think, well, this thing is slow, it's just lumbering up there, but to a seabird colony, this thing looks a lot like a predator bird that's just waiting to dive. And interestingly enough, dirigibles have a profound effect on seabirds. You wouldn't think that. Audible, obviously sudden sounds, especially oscillating sounds, loud, soft, like a jet ski, that kind of whine up and down, the acceleration, rapid acceleration, deceleration, construction equipment, airplanes, sirens, that type of thing. Now, obviously, we have urban sea lions and sea otters here in Monterey. You know, they're right next to Ocean View and Lighthouse, and there's cars and sirens going up and down this. But if you were to go down to Point Sur, the animals would be far different in what they can tolerate and what they can handle. Physical disturbance, actual contact with the animals or closing to within close proximity. You know, prodding them with a paddle to move them out of your way. I mean, that's obviously going to be disturbance. And then finally, environmental disturbances, oil spills, and everything that comes with oil spills, boats, planes, people, netting, buoys, that type of thing. And then marine debris, another type of disturbance to marine mammals, which will interfere with their life cycles or actually kill them. So this is a new vector for disturbance, these drones. The FAA refers to them as unmanned aircraft systems, or UAS. They're really nothing new. I mean, we've had remote-controlled aircraft for decades. It's just that these now, with particularly the rotary wing, are very maneuverable, very easy to operate because of the electronic systems that have been developed for them. You can launch them anywhere, and they can go just about anywhere, into the remotest reaches of the sanctuary down in the Big Sur coast or up north of Santa Cruz. And they're just growing in popularity. You can go down to Radio Shack or just about any other department store and pick one up for a couple $100, $300, put a camera on it, and it's a lot of fun. But they also have the propensity to be quite a disturbance for marine mammals, as you can assume. You take and hover this right over a rookery or take it into a bird area because I want to get close-up shots of the birds on their nests or whatever. And we had such an episode a couple of years ago with these two gentlemen who decided to fly not one but two of these at Hopkins Marine Reserve, not only a state protected area but part of the National Marine Sanctuary. And there were a bunch of harbor seals on the beach with pups. They managed to flush all of them into the water. And when adult animals like that startle, they just make a beeline for the water, crush the pups, go right over the top of them. And but this being Monterey, there were people on the rec trail who witnessed this and decided to give these two gentlemen their opinion about it. So of course, you see a young boy there, so you never contradict a father in front of his son, particularly his young son. So the father went into defense mode and said, hey, you know, I can fly this wherever the heck I want. But the long and the short of it is we haven't seen these two gentlemen return to this particular venue, at least, and conduct this activity. But this is the very type of thing that we're concerned about with this particular technology. So the sanctuary was designated in 1992, and shortly thereafter we had complaints of these 8-foot wingspan remote-controlled flying boats that were operating out of Elkhorn Slough. And the question was, is the operation of those in violation of sanctuary regulations? So the sanctuary at the time, and to this day, has a regulation that says that flying motorized aircraft below 1,000 feet altitude in certain parts of the sanctuary is prohibited. Well, Elkhorn Slough is one of those parts of the sanctuary. Well, then the question is, well, motorized aircraft is a remote-controlled plane, a motorized aircraft? Well, if it's motorized and it flies, it's a motorized aircraft. It doesn't have to have a person in it. It meets the definition. So yes, UAS, drones are motorized aircraft, and they cannot fly in any of these 4 places in the sanctuary. From Pescadero Point down to Santa Cruz, out 3 nautical miles, a 5-mile arc in front of Moss Landing Harbor, the Elkhorn Slough main channel itself, and then the largest zone, which runs from the mouth of the Carmel River out 3 nautical miles all the way to the southern end of the sanctuary. So since 2011, we've had some extraordinary years of marine mammals in the sanctuary, in close to shore. And so we've had this rising incidence, and some of them very dramatic, of people coming in contact, disturbing marine mammals, and in many cases putting themselves in harm's way, particularly when it comes to lunge feeding humpback whales. And some of the reasons for that are that we've had some shifting environmental oceanographic conditions in the sanctuary that are drawing the forage fish, the sardines and the anchovy, in close to shore. And if I start describing why those conditions are there, I'll get behind. So we'll just suffice it to say that the prey species are coming in closer to shore, and the predators are following them close to shore. So it seems like, oh my gosh, where are all these whales coming from? Well, they're just all the whales that used to be spread out there in the sanctuary. They've all now confined themselves to the near shore, chasing the food. But it's not just whales. It's dolphins and porpoise and sea lions and seals and so forth. So all these, this spectacle close to the shoreline, and people are at the shoreline, so it's very easy for them to get out there. And it prompts them to want to get out there. Secondly, proliferation of short-range cell phone camera use. So it used to be everybody took a camera when they went out there to take a picture. Well, now they've got these. And the focal length on these is pretty short. They don't have zoom lenses on them. And so they're really designed for taking a picture about 20 feet away. So if you want to get a good picture of the otter, you're going to have to what? Get 20 feet away or 10 feet away. And if you want a selfie with the otter, you're going to have to get closer than that. So they have this technology and the shift. Most people out on the water today, they've got one of these. They don't have a camera. And it's kind of a subtle thing, but it has had an effect. It draws people closer to get the shot that they want to get. Also, the increased use of the hobby UAS technology, which I just talked about, the drones, that's another issue, because that's increasing. And then wildlife programming by the media. Lots of great wildlife programming out there, but what you don't see is behind that lens of the BBC camera is a multi-million-dollar camera system with a huge zoom lens, which is getting this picture of the otter's teeth, and you can tell, oh, he needs to brush. So, but that gives people the idea or the perception that, oh, they got that picture right up there. They were right on that otter. No, they were half a mile away from the otter. And you're not going to get that shot with this unless you get right there. So that's another thing. And then successful marketing of Monterey Bay as a ecotourism spot. That just means, and it has been very successful. They even market the area with the sanctuary moniker. Come see the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. We've got all this great wildlife. It's been very successful, but what that also means is that you've just got a higher volume of people who are here, so you're going to have an increased incidence of interactions with wildlife. As a consequence, it's just do the math. And then finally, the social media portrayals. So when I get that selfie of me and the otter, what do? I stick it on Snapchat and Twitter and Facebook. And then, all my friends and all their friends see that, and they go, oh, I'm going to go down there and rent me a kayak and get me a shot like that. So these are just some of the reasons why we've seen this increase since 2011. But the question is, well, isn't that against the law? And I get questions about this all the time, both from the media and the public. I thought the law says that if you come within 50 feet of those animals, it's federal violation. It's the guillotine. And actually, I'm going to talk about what the law does say, and then I'm going to talk about what the law doesn't say. So there are about three major federal laws that apply to interacting with marine wildlife. The first one on my list is the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It's been around since 1972, and this is the definition of what's unlawful under that act. To feed, so throwing Cheetos to the sea lions, no. Even throwing fish to the sea lions, no. To feed, harass, hunt, capture, collect, kill, or to even attempt, even if you didn't successfully do that, even if you're trying to do that, is a violation of federal law, as well as to restrain, detain, tag, disturb, or molest a marine mammal. This is any marine mammal. Dugong, polar bear, manatee, whales, dolphins, sea lions, sea otters, any marine mammal in the United States. And this actually protects marine mammals all over the world from violations by a U.S. citizen no matter where you are. So you could be in Vietnam, and I mean the chances of this being prosecuted are probably kind of low, but technically if you violate the U.S. Marine Mammal Protection Act anywhere in the world as a U.S. citizen, that's a violation. So it's not even within the confines of the United States. Second act I want to talk about is the Endangered Species Act, also been around since about 1972-73. And as most of you know, this doesn't just protect marine mammals, it protects a wide variety of species, from plants to insects to marine mammals. Also, unlawful to harass, and kind of focusing on this disturbance aspect of these definitions, harm, pursue, chasing them, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, trap, capture, or collect, or attempt to. Now, one thing about the Endangered Species Act, which makes it a very, very powerful federal statute, is that not only can you not disturb or harm the animal, you cannot harm their habitat. Remember the spotted owl issue up in the Northwest? So it's considered, if you destroy or injure their habitat that's listed as endangered or threatened, it's as if you basically took a swipe at the animal itself. So it actually protects their habitat. Very powerful federal statute. So now the National Marine Sanctuaries Act, near and dear to my heart, which basically says it's unlawful to conduct any of the above in a national marine sanctuary, such as Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and it's unlawful to collect even a dead or injured marine mammal, seabird, or sea turtle. To restrain or detain a marine mammal, seabird, or sea turtle. Basically, I won't read through the whole section here. You can see it on the screen, but it's a very broad, extensive protection of all marine mammals, sea turtles, and birds in the sanctuary. And then finally, the Sanctuaries Act and our regulations specific to the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary prohibit flying aircraft in those overflight zones that I showed you previously. It's presumed, simply presumed, if you fly below 1,000 feet, you've disturbed marine mammals and birds unless you can prove you did not, which is a hard thing to do. So you're basically in violation unless you can bring irrefutable evidence that you flew that plane for 30 miles through that zone and did not. You'd have to have biologists stationed all up and down the shoreline to try to bring that kind of evidence to the court. So basically, if you fly below 1,000 feet in a motorized aircraft, it's an automatic violation. We don't even have to show disturbance. It's presumed that it occurred. Now that's federal law. State of California values its resources as well. And the Fish and Game Code says it's unlawful to hunt, pursue, catch, capture, or kill any marine mammal or endangered, threatened marine species. The state has its own Endangered Species Act and its own lists of animals that are endangered and threatened, which may or may not coincide with the federal list because they may have more local concerns in the state of California. The code also says it's unlawful to hunt, pursue, catch, capture, or kill any bird or marine mammal in a game refuge, such as a Hopkins Reserve or Point Lobos or any of the MPAs, Marine Protected Areas, that the state has set up. And also it's unlawful to fly any aircraft, this is state of California, below 1,000 feet above water or land of the California Sea Otter Game Refuge, which runs from the mouth of the Carmel River south to Cambria, the Point Lobos State Reserve, and the Año Reserve. So the state has its own overflight restriction. So that's what the law says. So I've been kind of focusing on disturbance more than mortal wounding, because really the death by 1,000 cuts is a disturbance issue. It's not people shooting the animals, although we have that from time to time. There's not typically an immediate lethal take. It's this chronic take. So disturbance, any act, and disturbance is not defined by distance from the animal. The law does not do that. And there's reasons for that. I can explain it in a minute. Any act, intentional or unintentional, that causes a protected animal to alter its behavior is a violation. That's a disturbance. So if the animal is sleeping and you approach the animal such that it wakes up and looks at you, you've just altered its behavior. That technically is a violation. That's all it takes. If the animal was feeding and it stopped feeding because you came along and did something to interrupt that, that's a violation. So, I've kind of got ahead of myself. It begins, the animal typically, the first part of disturbance is you've got the animal's attention, which is typically what people want to do, because they're, woo, 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 look over here, take your picture, come here, woo, come here, wake up, wake up. I mean, I've watched people do this for the 20 years that I've worked for the sanctuary, down at the breakwater or Cannery Row or whatever. And when the animal raises up and looks and locks its gaze, that's the first step of disturbance. It's already occurred. You just interrupted the sleep pattern right there. It's going to take 15 minutes for an otter to get back into that sleep pattern. A restless response. Okay, you got the head up now. With birds, they start doing this, and then they'll start doing this. Right? Otters will sometimes, or sea lions, you'll see them do this. They'll start going side to side. So that's, now you're getting body response. They're getting more fidgety. Now they start diving, swimming away. All of this is disturbance. Vocalization. They start barking, squealing, whistling, bellowing, snorting. You know, this rapid breathing type thing. It's kind of a telltale sign, guys. I mean, and these almost kind of come in this same kind of cascading succession. Aggressive response. Now, this one most people get. When the sea lion's coming at you with his teeth bared and he's coming at you really fast, then most people figure, I think I've disturbed the animal. Okay? But then that's kind of a little too late. You've got it really agitated by that time. So what does the law not say? There's no mandatory standoff requirements within Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Not under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, not under the Endangered Species Act, not under the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. Now, let me explain this. If there were, first of all, it varies from species to species what disturbs them. A sea otter that lives in Monterey Harbor, which we do have, I've passed within 10 feet of an otter on a boat in Monterey Harbor, and the thing's sitting there eating a crab, and it could care less. But you get within 100 yards of an otter off Point Sur, and they're already evading you. So there is no one size fits all. To try to say there's a set distance. Also, if you had, let's say we had a 100-yard standoff distance, you wouldn't be able to enter any harbor on the West Coast. Because where do sea lions gather? On the jetties, at the entrance to the harbors, both sides. You draw two concentric circles, 100 yards, you just closed off the harbor. And or either that, or people are going to be in violation every single day as they cross in and out of the harbor, because they're going to break that zone. And it does. And do those sea lions out here on the Monterey breakwater care about a boat 100 yards away, even 50 yards away? Heck no. I mean, they've acclimatized. So the disturbance factor, that's what we're concerned about. Are you disturbing that animal? Also, it differs. Birds who are nesting, far more fidgety than birds who aren't. And actually, birds who are about to nest are more fidgety than birds who are sitting on nests, because birds that are sitting on nests are loath to leave their nest. They will actually hunker down and stay there more than those who are just starting to build a nest. If they're just starting to build a nest and they keep getting flushed, they just leave. They don't nest. They may not nest at all that year, or they're going to look someplace else. So that's why the set distance thing there's no uniform distance that you can use that's going to work for all species, even one species. It changes with seasonality. It changes with where they are, what they're acclimatized to. So NOAA Fisheries has, however, and this is where people get confused, NOAA Fisheries has issued some approach guidelines. And this is just to give people an idea of when I get within this certain distance, I should really be watching the animal for the very things that I just showed you. The head bobbing, the gaze at you, the body language. So it's a guideline to help prevent disturbance. But it really puts the onus on the observer. For whales, 100-yard recommended standoff distance. That's good for the whales, and it's good for you. It's size of a locomotive, and you know, even if you get hit by a train at only 10 miles an hour, it can hurt. And same holds for whales. Also, you don't get right behind the whales, and you'll get right up on top of them. Then we've got sea lions and seal haul-out rookeries, 100-yard recommended. Dolphins and porpoise in the water, 50-yard recommended standoff distance. And then they've also issued guidelines to help observers prevent disturbance. Don't cross the path or pursue them. Don't surround them. Stop the propeller if you're in a boat. If they approach you, make no physical contact. And then for otters, we've got some local guidelines here in Monterey Bay. 50-foot standoff distance, about 5 kayak lengths. At that point, you approach within 5 kayak lengths, you want to start kind of watching their behavior. If they start to turn and look, then you're too close. You don't cross their path, you don't chase them, you don't point your bow directly at them. If you're approaching otters, you approach them from an oblique, kind of keep them off your beam, and you don't surround them. And then you stop and back away if the otter displays an alert, response, and make no physical contact. So, regulatory zoning, these are just some actions that the sanctuary has taken to try to reduce wildlife disturbance. Regulatory zoning like the overflight zones. Team Ocean, which is our volunteer on the water team. They talk to other kayakers and boaters. Baynet Shoreline interpretive docents. They talk to folks, on the rec trail particularly. Then interpretive and regulatory enforcement by enforcement personnel. It's the nice cop approach. Visitor center interpretation and messaging. School marine science curricula. Shoreline signage. Wildlife viewing guidelines on the web. And then we've got posters. Let me go back to that poster because I want you to get a good look at it to appreciate it. Don't be that guy. Superintendent statements, which are kind of media bulletins, and then whenever we get a chance to make these same arguments that I'm making with you on TV, we do that as well with the media. The Thank You Ocean campaign, some of you may be familiar with. Support to Friends of the Elephant Seal Interpretive Program down in San Simeon. Encouragement and support to the eco tour operators here so that they incorporate environmental messaging when they're renting their kayaks and paddle boards out to folks. And then collaborative enforcement when we need it you take the hard enforcement approach with the few knuckleheads who just don't want to play. So what can you do to help? How can you be Dudley Do-Right? Learn responsible wildlife watching techniques, and we've got lots of materials for that. As a matter of fact, in the back corner here, I've got these little pocket guides which give some tips on responsible wildlife viewing. You're welcome to take one for yourself, even a few, if you have folks you'd like to hand them out to. And then encouraging others to observe those very same wildlife techniques that you incorporate into your wildlife viewing. You can volunteer with Baynet or Team Ocean or other organizations that promote wildlife stewardship, like Save Our Shores or what have you. You can download the free Whale Alert mobile app if you're a techie. You want to put that on your phone. That you can actually report when you see whales, where you sight them, and it will also give you information about whale sightings in the area if you're interested in finding where there's some whales real time. Nice, convenient, free app off the web. And then finally, you can report wildlife and pollution violations 24/7 at the Cal Tip hotline. This goes to California Department of Fish and Game 24/7. Handy number to have, and you can even stay anonymous if you want to. But if you do ever call in and you're anonymous, give them as much detail as you can, because law enforcement always loves to be able to call somebody back. They always have follow-up questions. And it really helps if you don't give an anonymous, if you're willing to have them call you back. And then finally, use a camera with a zoom lens and leave your cell phone at home so you don't lose your whole directory and all your files when it falls in the salt water from your kayak. So that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be welcome to take them.